The idea that water washes away all the evidence is a myth. To the point of this paper, yes, there is definitely an element of that that is false. There is a lot of evidence that gets left behind on a body. Water does not wash it away. I think they note that even fingerprints can still be lifted from a body. However, I think what's most important about at least these cases is you're getting it away from the actual, even if it's an accident site, by the time they find the body, it is usually miles away, we're assuming, from where the original accident happened. So, for example, if you have someone that's drunk, they're crossing a bridge and they fall off the bridge, perhaps if you knew that where that bridge was, you could find some trace of them. If they cut themselves while they were falling off the edge of the bridge, you might find a little blood. If they dropped their wallet while they were falling or something like that, you would find it at the bridge. You wouldn't necessarily find it where the body is found. And that's one of the really tough things when I'm looking at these cases and trying to understand how the forensics of this are handled by police. These are extremely difficult for them to investigate because they are finding the body not even at a location where it might have been dumped, but after nature has taken its course and moved this body into a completely different area. So trace evidence, I think, is a real challenge in these types of cases. These drownings don't fit a serial killer motive. This is where this paper starts to take a turn for me, and it seems like they're under the belief that this is a single serial killer, and I don't think that is necessarily the theory that the detectives are putting out. The theory that they're putting out is this is some kind of organized syndicate of killers. They're even kind of talking about it almost like terrorist cells, that, you know, first there was some happening around here, so there must be a group that was doing it here. Then there's others happening around here, so there's another group that's doing it there. I believe they even have disappearances that happen on the same night in different places. So it's pretty much proven that this is not the result of one serial killer. However, I have a theory that might tie into that, which we're going to get into later. They also had someone that was in jail that kind of confessed to it. They're saying that those are unreliable. If you've watched this show at all, you know that we've bumped into cases of this before, and they are sometimes, seems like a lot of the time, found to be unreliable when confessions like that come out. So let's move it along here. This is an article on CNN from Monday, April 3rd, 2006. So this is reaching back a little bit. It's called Drinking and Drowning. They drank, they get drunk, and they drowned. That's the tragic scenario that plays out far too often in Minnesota and Wisconsin, where there are lots of college campuses and lots of water. In that region alone, 12 college students have wound up dead in the water over the past decade after wandering away from a party or bar following a long night of drinking. I was really surprised when I found this article because it calls out two of the states in particular that have had a lot of these cases that are part of this number of 40 cases that the detectives are talking about. Specifically, Minnesota and Wisconsin are kind of highlighted as being a hot spot for these cases. So this article, you know, it's written in 2006, so I think this is before those detectives came out with their theory. If I recall correctly, that was around 2008. But this article is already going under the presumption that this is a problem related specifically to college, usually men, drinking too heavily, being close to large bodies of water, falling in and drowning. As a matter of fact, there's even a story in my family. My grandmother was married twice, and her first husband was walking home drunk one night and fell into a river, and a shallow river, and drowned. So I think if you look throughout history, there is some pretense for this possibly happening. We'll do a little more research on that as we go on here to see how practical it is. As a matter of fact, let's do it right now. So this is from cdc.gov, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Unintentional drowning, get the facts. So I just wanted to get an idea. What type of problem is this? What are the odds that someone is going to drown? And outside of that, what are the odds that they're going to be drunk and drown? So every day, about 10 people die from unintentional drowning. Let me just say that again. Every day, 10 people die from unintentional drowning. So that gives you a huge sample base. And when we're talking about these detectives' story, they've only pulled together 40 cases. That's literally 4 days worth of people drowning that match their criteria. When you start considering the statistical significance of these drownings, that's starting to make that 40 look maybe not so important. However, there are specific details about the 40. These are college-age men, usually in their early 20s. They are predominantly white in terms of these victims. So, and the fact that they're men, they're pretty much always men. So let's continue looking. About 1 in 5 people who die from drowning are children 14 and younger. So we know they don't match that criteria. Males, nearly 80% of people who die from drowning are male. And I found reference to this in a few places, and there's not a very well understood scientific explanation for this. A lot of people attribute it to kind of male bravado, men pushing themselves beyond their limits, not really understanding what they're getting into, and then all of a sudden they are in trouble and can't get out of it. There is actually, I was going to pass this up, but they do mention minorities, and the fact that the unintentional drowning rate for African Americans is significantly higher than that of whites. And that is one point that's brought up by the detectives. There's also a college professor that kind of joined those detectives, especially when they were doing a lot of press on the major news circuit. And that's a point that they brought up too. Why are we seeing predominantly a lot of young white males where this is happening? Now, we know that these are Midwest colleges. I think that that will skew the statistical significance quite a bit. But it is worth noting that in terms of the general statistics, that according to the CDC, the African Americans have a significantly higher rate than whites across all ages for drowning. That's another thing worth noting about this article. This is written a bit with recreational drowning in mind. It does talk about some other aspects at the end, but it never really gets to the point of talking about people that are drunk and walk into a river. Even when it talks about large body of waters near the bottom of this article, it sounds like it's assuming oceans. It's talking about using, life vests that have been approved by, here, let's go down. The U.S. Coast Guard approved life jackets, colored beach flags, watch for dangerous waves and signs of rip currents. That is all beach talk to me. This article really doesn't go into rivers or even lakes in particular. And the last point that kind of ties in here is alcohol use. Among adolescents and adults, alcohol use is involved in up to 70% of deaths associated with water recreation. So there are significant numbers here. Once again, if you think of that large pool that we have to go from of 10 people per day, of those that are males, adolescents, and adults, 70% of those involve alcohol. Trying to find 40 people that fit this criteria of this murder theory does not seem so far-fetched, especially when you're going through a range of several years. And I think the range that they were looking at was well over a decade, 1997 to at least 2008. So kind of tough to get a good grasp on this for me. While I was doing the research, of course, anyone that lives close to Los Angeles and was alive during the LA riots would recall this name, Rodney King. And Rodney King, I didn't even realize this. I must have missed when this story happened. But he drowned while intoxicated, according to a coroner. Essentially, he showed up at someone's house. He was drunk at their back door, and all of a sudden there was a splash. She didn't know how to save him. I think she tried to help him by reaching in with a couple of objects, but couldn't get him out, and he drowned. So here's just another case. Now, I know some of you are definitely conspiracy minded, and you could be saying, oh, John, everyone knows that Rodney King was eventually knocked off by the LAPD, and that's how they did it. I don't have any information to say that. This is 20 years after the fact that he died. Do I think something like that could be possible? I definitely always leave room for it, but in terms of what we're discussing here, I just wanted to bring it up as yet another example that this does happen. People do seem to have some affinity, especially men, for drinking or doing some drugs, getting too close to a body of water, falling in, and then not being able to handle what happens next. This is an article from exploreforensics.co.uk, so this is based in the United Kingdom. And in particular, I wanted to cover this: drowning and crime. Drowning is difficult to prove beyond the accidental death stage simply because of the nature in which it happens. Proving that an unknown assailant in some way aided the death of another by drowning is difficult to establish and can usually only be established if there are physical wounds, such as cuts or bruises, or indeed if an eyewitness has saw the event take place. The pathologist will attempt to reconstruct what happened by first determining what didn't happen. This may sound a little contradictory, but it is the easiest way to rule out anything other than accidental death. Quite simply, if the pathologist has been asked to autopsy a body that was found in water but does not have any physical injuries or problems with heart disease, then the most likely conclusion is that the death was caused by drowning and is then listed as death by misadventure. Just to touch on it, this is actually a picture of Shane Montgomery. This is another young, white, athletic male, Pennsylvania college student, 21 years old when he went missing, last seen by friends at a bar in downtown Philadelphia the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And there is something about this. The 40 cases in particular that the detectives are looking at seem to occur around times where the school year has just begun. A few of the disappearances are around holidays like Halloween, Thanksgiving, even Christmas. Of course, logically, if you think about these are times where people are going to consume more alcohol, are going to go out and party, have a good time, try to get into the holiday spirits. I know when I was younger, Halloween night was always a time when I was looking to go to a bar and have a good time and maybe drink a little too much. So, but there is some statistical significance because the types of accidental drownings that we were looking at on that CDC website are more related to recreational use, and those deaths would occur more during the summer months. And at least for the 40 cases that the detectives have put together, they don't fit that criteria. These are months where typically you would not have a whole lot of recreational drowning type issues, especially in those Midwestern states that take on pretty harsh falls and extremely harsh winters. I don't think you're going to have people that are going into the lake intentionally around those months. So once again, that information just is really hard for me to use one way or another. It does seem like there's a trend happening here, but once you look back at these numbers, 10 drownings a day, is it possible to find these 40 elements that just are statistical? They might not be anomalies. It's hard to know because you're looking at these 40 specific cases and not every case that also happened in that time frame that isn't a male, that isn't a young white male college student. We don't know how these detectives compiled their information. It seems to me like they were trying to match an MO and use that MO to find other victims. And I don't know if that's the best scientific method for truly investigating something like this. Now, to their credit, they're trying to solve a problem in terms of how police would process this. Every death is going to be processed as a local event. There is no overarching body that is going to look at those individual instances and say, hey, we have a trend that's happening nationally here. So that's where the two detectives, I think, were really trying to provide some service that they thought would go beyond what the traditional law enforcement services are. Spotting a trend that is across several different jurisdictions, reaching all the way from the Midwest to the East Coast. What's strange about that is I've also seen other articles that are referring to smiley face murders in Finland, smiley face murders in Madrid, Spain. So it appears to me that the set of circumstances they're looking for are easy enough to replicate that we're seeing them happen in other places. Unless, and here we're going to get into the theory. My first gut instinct about this, before I really dove into the case, was the smiley face thing definitely hit me in terms of the internet. I was just thinking about how often we all use that just when typing an email, sending a text. It gets used a lot. And the reason for why you would mark a site with a smiley face. It seems to me that if there was some system on the internet, for example, like let's say there's a website on the dark web somewhere that is teaching people how to commit this type of crime, maybe there's some benefit to that system for them to tag the site to prove that it was done using that method. So I don't know if, it's weird. If I was going to write a book on this, so let me just, I'm departing right now into purely fictional space, okay? But if I was going to write a book kind of loosely based on these events, I would be theorizing something about a website on the dark web where people go, talk about other people that they don't like, and then maybe an unrelated suspect would take care of that person and tag the scene so that other people in the community would know, oh, that was done by us. You know, John took care of Jack's problem. Now Jack has to return the favor by taking care of Bill's problem. Bill gives back to the community by taking care of Jane's problem. And we all know that it's working because the sites are being tagged appropriately with this mark. So I don't even necessarily tie that theory specifically to what's happening here, but when you're looking at this from the outside, there does seem to be a pattern. The detectives clearly identified a pattern of person that this tragedy is happening to. The question is this a naturally occurring phenomenon? Which we looked at the data. The data does seem to suggest that this could be a naturally occurring phenomenon that we're trying to pin a boogeyman on. However, if you flip it the other way and consider, okay, what kind of boogeyman would be doing this? My gut is telling me it wouldn't necessarily be the most organized group of people. It wouldn't have to be. It could be a system laid out by one particularly organized type of killer that is sharing his information with other people so that they could take care of problems local to them. And when you think about these guys, it was noted they were all popular. Are there people in their lives that don't like them for some reason? Probably. Successful, good-looking, young, popular, partying. They probably have some enemies along the way. Does that mean that that enemy is necessarily the related enemy is doing this crime to that person? In the system that I just went to for the little book, fictional book that I would write about this, not necessarily. So I know that's a really weird place to take this, but I had to share that with you guys because it's something that was nagging at me since before I dove into this. It kind of stayed solid all through my research on this, but I give it to you with a huge grain of salt. My gut is telling me that's not what's happening here. My gut is telling me this is a natural phenomena. It's related to binge drinking and an issue that's already affecting us in terms of people unintentionally drowning. And when you couple that up with survivors that are looking for answers, that's where I think this form of a boogeyman might start being created. As a matter of fact, let's just take one step back here to this exploreforensics.co.uk. And under the article, I started reading the comments, and nearly every single comment is someone talking about a death that occurred close to them. On January 13th, my nephew went fishing along with 10 other men. They said he tried to cross the river but had cramps and got drowned. Sir, my sister death asphyxia due to drowning. We think it's a murder. Everything in these comments, my friend was found in a pool with her legs outside of the pool and her body on the water. This thing is loaded with comments of distressed family members trying to find an answer that is more believable to them than it was just an accident. And statistically, when you look at how many deaths like this happen, I really am not sure that it is more than an accident. So it's really a tough spot. I didn't know how this video was going to end, and here I am, and I don't really know how to end it. In a lot of ways, I feel like the trend, at least, is worth looking at. If there is a problem this bad with college-aged men drowning in rivers like this, why isn't someone getting this information out on campuses, sharing this information? Why isn't there some artist that's writing a movie, or why isn't Hollywood trying to raise awareness around this? If it is something more nefarious than that, then I hope these two detectives continue their work and help expose that to the rest of us. But as for right now, at least in terms of recent media, the buzz has kind of died down on this. It does come back up every now and then with another death that fits this criteria, as I've talked about with both with Paul and Shane. However, at the end of the day, I think we just leave it with families that are mourning a loss that is very, very difficult to understand. And of course, my heart goes out to anyone that's in that situation, and everyone that posted on this website looking for answers and input into helping them better understand this. I can't imagine how tough it is. So once again, thank you to BrainScratcher Allison. She did some of the research that is actually presented here, was given to me directly from her. I did some more on top of that, but she really got the ball rolling for this episode, so I wanted to send a huge thank you to you and to everyone else that joined us on this Friday. I hope you enjoyed this Brain Scratch. Have a great weekend, and I will catch you next week on Geek and Dorks, a YouTube channel. Take care.